Consistently increasing your range of motion and your strength at your new range of motion is the key to achieving mobility gains that last. In this video, we're going to cover 4 shoulder exercise mobility progressions, which includes exercises you've probably never done before that wake up muscles you've never worked before to give you lasting gains in your shoulder mobility. Hey, this is Coach E from Precision Movement, and today I think you're going to really understand why we're called Precision Movement, because we're going to go through a number of different exercises where you'll be taught various cues, and as you go through the video and the exercises a number of times to repeat the routines I'm going to share with you, you'll feel the difference in how the exercise challenges your body and how the exercise feels after you're done. So if you like doing things right, if you like doing things precisely, hit the subscribe button so you can continue on this journey to moving freely and without pain with us. So this video is really important for especially those people who suffer from some type of shoulder pain or pain in their body, and they want to improve their mobility and their function and their ability to do different techniques, whether it's in sport or recreational activities. But whenever they think of doing mobility or flexibility, they think of static stretching. That's the common go-to for people. And I can't tell you how many clients that I've seen come in here with pain that hasn't been resolved over months, because my average amount of time that a person has been in pain before they come to see me is anywhere between 5, 6, 7 months. And whenever I go through history and look at what have they done between when the pain or the injury first happened and now that they're seeing me, I inevitably find a number of static stretches in their rehab programming. And this is problematic because if you just think logically, if a tissue is torn, a muscle is torn, or a tendon is already torn, and you just pull on it, you pull on it for 30 seconds or 60 seconds, and you're trying to go for an uncomfortable stretch, what do you think is happening to that tear or that already irritated or damaged tissue? Well, the chances of it becoming more irritated, more damaged, more torn is pretty high. So active exercises are what we predominantly prescribe. That's like 99% of the exercises in our ROM Coach app. And there are over 200 exercises there. So we've got like 2 or 3 static stretches in the app. And even if static stretching did improve your flexibility, it's not improving your strength, your joint stability, your joint control. So you're missing out on these other elements that are required for function. If you're just sitting there and you're not doing anything, whatever, if it relieves the pain a little bit, more power to you. But if you're going out, you're playing tennis, you're running, you're doing CrossFit, whatever it is you're doing, you need your muscles to be controlling your body and providing stability to your joints so you don't get injured and that joint doesn't get further damaged. The first exercise we're going to cover is the pinwheel. The pinwheel is great because it trains a range of motion most people don't go into, which is behind the body. It also gets the internal and external rotators doing axial rotation and really focuses on the retractors and the reversers. Now, if you're not too familiar with those last few terms that I mentioned, we've got a video called the 5 movements that everybody should master for pain-free shoulders, and we'll put a link to that in the description down below. For the pinwheel, start off standing in good alignment and good posture, and you're going to bring one arm up overhead and the other arm down below and try to touch the hands behind your back. This is also known as the Apley scratch test. From here, you're going to straighten your elbows out, and then you're going to move the shoulders through rotation and switching arm positions. Move nice and slow, maintain good posture, make sure you're not hyperextending your lumbar spine. You keep your lumbar spine relaxed, keep your chin tucked to maintain that good alignment, and keep going back and forth. Now, right now, don't worry about sets or reps. We're going to cover that at the end of this video, but just make sure that you have those technique elements covered. The progression of the pinwheel is the prone pinwheel. So prone means lying down on your stomach, face down on the floor. And the difference with this exercise is now we're using gravity to achieve greater activation of the retractors and the reversers. The one difference here is you're really trying to drive your arms up away from the floor the whole time as your hands are behind your back and when your arms are switching positions. Now, you may have noticed that my hands didn't necessarily touch behind my back on both sides for both progressions. Don't worry about this. Just try to go through your full range of motion and work to push that range of motion. The next group of exercises is great for integrating the shoulders with the core. And we're starting this one off with the wall rollout. It's kind of like doing an ab wheel rollout, but on the wall. For this technique, you start off, and you can just use your hands on the wall if you've got a normal wall where you can slide your hands up and down. Start off with the hands flat on the wall in front of you and lean into the wall slightly. So step your feet back a little bit. From here, engage the abs to keep the rib cage down, so avoiding that rib cage flare, and you're going to maintain this throughout the exercise. With straight elbows, you're going to raise the arms up slowly and slide the arms up overhead as far as you can while maintaining the core stability and preventing that rib cage flare. And you go back and forth, making sure that you're breathing naturally, which is really important to train with core stability, and you're avoiding any movement at that lumbar spine. Now this exercise is great because a lot of times people who lack shoulder flexion range of motion compensate through their lumbar spine, and then they end up with low back pain because they're hinging often at the thoracolumbar junction. That's where the thoracic spine meets the lumbar spine. And when they go to treat their low back without dealing with the shoulder range of motion, it's never gonna be stabilized or fixed. To progress this exercise, we're going to use the stability ball and do the SB rollback. This takes it up a notch. Again, we're going to this prone position, but here we're going to have our hands on the floor and our feet up on the ball, or our legs up on the ball. It's a little bit easier if you put your legs on the ball compared to your feet. From here, the same rules apply. Engage the abdominals to prevent that rib cage flare. Keep your elbows straight, and then you push your body back so you become flat, which is the same arm movement, which is shoulder flexion. Get to the full range of motion that you can get to without losing stability through the core and without bending the elbows, and then slowly pull yourself back to the start position. Keep going back and forth while breathing naturally throughout, again to train your ability to breathe while maintaining core stability. Now this variation not only increases the load because of gravity, but it increases the challenge due to the instability of the ball, and that's going to help wake up other muscles that aren't used as much when you're on the stable surface like the wall. The third group of exercise progressions here is Scap circles. Now this one has a number of different variations that you can do, and it's not necessarily that one is better than the other, just like for the other variations that I mentioned. It's just that each one is going to target the muscles and the shoulder girdle in a specific way because of the orientation of the body. The base technique is starting off and making sure you're in good posture and alignment, and you're not changing the spinal alignment as you perform the exercise. So oftentimes the head will want to jut forward. Avoid doing that. The goal of this exercise is to make the scapular movements as big as possible. So you start off retracting, pulling the shoulder blades back together, again, making sure you're not moving your spine, and then lifting them up as high as you can while keeping them back. From here, you keep them up high as you protract and move forward, and then keep your shoulder girdle as forward as possible as you go down and depress the scapula. And then you scrape the bottom, keeping the scapula down as you go back and retract, and you repeat. You're making the circle or the square, you can think of 4 sides of a box, as big as possible. One set will be doing this in one direction and in the other direction. Now we're going to go through really quickly 4 variations. So remember the key techniques and form cues that we just talked about and apply them to these 4 different positions. The first is the hinged position, where you're standing and then you perform a hip hinge and you're going horizontal, or trying to make your torso as horizontal to the floor as possible. This will put greater emphasis on the retractors and the posterior shoulder muscles, and less emphasis everywhere else. Next up, you could go with your hands on the floor, either in a 4-point stance or a front support like a push-up position. Here, greater emphasis is on protraction because you're pushing away from the floor and you're fighting gravity. So that's going to work muscles like the serratus anterior more than the retractor muscles like the rhomboids and the lower and middle trapezius. The next variation has you inverted or hanging, whether it's under a bar or, like I'm showing here, under a set of gymnastics rings. Here again, we're going to put more emphasis on the retractors, just like the hinged version. However, this time we're fighting against our body weight. So it's going to be more challenging because there's greater load as opposed to when you're hinged and you're just lifting the weight of the arms. The fourth and final variation I'd like to show you today is the neutral support position. So this one you can do with your hands on a chair behind you, or you could do it like I'm showing here on a set of gymnastics rings. Again, the gymnastics rings, you're supporting your whole body weight this time, which makes it infinitely more challenging than if you're doing it on a chair behind you and your feet are resting on the ground. But again, the same rules apply. Maintain a neutral spine and a quiet spine so it doesn't move as you perform the exercise, and make those circles or squares with your scapula as big as possible. Now, the one variation you might be thinking about after I've gone through those previous four is an overhead variation, whether you're holding weights up overhead or you're in a handstand position. And this is one that I wouldn't necessarily recommend just because you're putting a lot of load on your shoulder girdle and you're going into an impingement position, which would be scapula and shoulder blades down and back with the arms overhead. This is a common error that people are often taught by trainers or coaches to keep the shoulders down and back when you're doing exercise like presses or handstands, and that's just going to cause some impingement in the shoulder and can irritate the rotator cuff tendon, the biceps tendon, or the labrum or the bursa. So let's avoid that variation. We've got enough to play with to build strength and stability and function in our shoulders. The one great thing about all the variations here with the scap circles is that we're training the same range of motion with different emphases on different muscles and different movements. And this is one way to solidify any gains of range that you might make, because your brain is going to see, oh, I have strength, control throughout this full range of motion and all these muscles and all these different patterns. That becomes really hardwired and it becomes difficult to lose. So once you get it, it's really easy to keep it. The fourth and final shoulder mobility exercise progressions I'd like to show you starts off with the sword exercise. The sword is a very common exercise prescribed in rehab where you're training abduction, flexion, and external rotation. You start off with a cable attached down low, and your arm is across your body like you're about to unsheath a sword. From here, you're going to lift the cable up in a diagonal motion across the body until your palm faces forward. Throughout this exercise, again, you maintain a neutral spine without rotating the body and staying really stable. The progression to the sword is what I call the rotational sword. And this is a full body exercise that incorporates the rotational plane of movement. For this technique, you're starting off the same way with your hand and the cable set up down low, but now you're going to rotate and face the cable and put most of your weight on the foot that's closest to the cable. In this case, it's my right foot. From here, you're going to do the same arm motion and unsheath the sword, but then you're going to shift your weight over to your left foot and end up in a position where it kind of looks like you're holding an Olympic torch. This exercise incorporates the full body, and because it incorporates the rotational plane of movement, it's really great for athletes like tennis players, baseball players, golfers, anybody who rotates in their sport. So those are the 4 exercise progressions for your shoulder mobility. I hope you got something new out of them. And here's a summary of these exercises and how many sets and reps to do. The first group of exercises was the pinwheel and the prone pinwheel. You can perform 2 to 3 sets of 3 to 5 reps here. The next group of exercises was the wall rollout and the SB rollback. Perform 2 to 3 sets of 6 to 10 reps. Next, we had the scap circles, and there are a number of different variations, including standing, hinged, front support, 4-point, inverted, and neutral support. Perform 1 to 2 sets of 3 to 6 circles per direction per set. Finally, we perform the sword and the rotational sword. For this group of exercises, do 2 to 3 sets of anywhere from 6 to 10 repetitions each side. Perform the routines for 3 to 4 weeks, each 2 to 3 days per week for best results. So that's why we're called Precision Movement. Let us know what you thought of the video and the exercises. Make sure you're subscribed, and we've got other content to keep you moving freely and without pain. One is the video I talked about earlier on 5 shoulder movements to master. This is one on the serratus anterior, which is probably the most important shoulder muscle for stability and for people with pain. And finally, if you want us to guide you through everything in a progressive fashion check out our shoulder pain solution course. This will take you from wherever you are to zero pain, maximum function, and have you living the active life you love.